All right, it is 10:07 and it's a Tuesday morning. It's a special morning because today is election day. Election day here in New York City. There is a lot at stake. Of course, all eyes will be on the race for mayor. The Democratic primary is today. And yeah, talking about that, not really sure where that music is coming from. Let's see. Becoming the next mayor of New York City. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes, breaking down some of the candidates who are out there, who are making their last minute push. Zohran Mamdani, the state assembly member, of course, he's positioned pretty strongly after the first round of early voting. And also, of course, former Governor Andrew Cuomo. He is the front runner, but his lead is narrowing. We have seen that over the last few days, especially with this new partnership, essentially, between Brad Lander and Zohran Mamdani, which could have a real significant factor when it comes to the ranked choice voting, which is how they do the primary here in New York City. I want to talk a little bit more about that in detail in just a couple minutes. But first, we just want to go through some of the other headlines that we are tracking here, not just in the city, but all across the country this morning. So the one thing that everyone is going to notice here in the city is that it's hot out there. The temperature is going to be between 100 degrees, depending on where you are, maybe even up to more than that. And it's definitely going to feel like it's 105 or so, the heat index, as they say. So that's going to create dangerous conditions for everyone out there. We're taking a look at the skyline. We kind of have those three H's that we have today. We have the heat, we have the humidity, and when you look at it, we have the haze. And when you get that haze, you know it gets that humidity that is out there that just kind of makes you feel like you need to jump in the shower as soon as you go outside. So we're watching that, what's happening with that. Health concerns, obviously, but also for a lot of people, it's going to be the power outages. We know that Con Ed is tracking some outages that they've been dealing with here in the city. A handful of customers now. If you're one of those customers, though, you feel like you're in big trouble today because you need those ACs, you need that fan at the very least, and if you don't have power, you got big problems. In other parts of the city, we know that they are doing some of the voltage reductions. That's to make sure that they don't have bigger problems. So that's one of the things that's happening with the heat in the city. Of course, the heat is coming on primary day. So how's that going to affect the actual election results? You might be surprised just in some of the data points that we're looking at here. We think that the record-breaking heat will play an impact on the election results themselves. So we do have some information and some data points that we want to talk about when it comes to that. What else is going on out there in the world today? Here in the city, also the court case in Lower Manhattan, the one that everybody's been following is the Diddy case. And that we expect will pretty much come to a conclusion in the next 2 days or so. The prosecution is expected to rest today. They're going to call maybe another witness to clarify some evidence. And the defense is not expected to call any witnesses. So Diddy himself will not testify. We got that information yesterday. And so we think that the defense is just going to call perhaps someone to clarify some of their talking points, or at least present some new evidence on their behalf. So all in all, that's expected to wrap up by Thursday. So here's what's going on today. We got the hot weather, the heat, and that heat is coming on election day. And we're also tracking what's happening with the Diddy case. And of course, the international conflict that everyone is watching this morning is this ceasefire deal that was supposed to be in place between Israel and Iran, but it's not going great. It really is not going great so far. President Donald Trump announced this ceasefire last night. He was positioning himself as someone who had worked behind the scenes to make this deal happen. This deal would have come after the historic bombing of some of those nuclear sites, sites where the Iranian government had been storing some of its nuclear-capable fuel, enrichment centers, enrichment sites. That happened over the weekend. Late last night, the president announced that he'd reached or brokered a ceasefire deal between Iran and Israel. Well, what happened? That ceasefire deal is in big trouble this morning. Within hours, both sides resumed attacks. Israel with airstrikes, Iran with rocket fire. And it was a pretty surprising remark from President Trump this morning from outside the White House as he got ready to board Marine One because he's going to the summit in the Netherlands for some of the global leaders. But as he left the White House, he publicly condemned Israel, a rare rebuke for a president of the United States to take and say publicly that strong position against Israel and what happened. He actually dropped an F-bomb live on camera outside of the White House, a moment that was broadcast all around the world, clearly frustrated that this ceasefire deal that he'd brokered was pretty much in shambles this morning. Kind of highlights his growing frustration there, but also the scrutiny on how the White House is handling this. A lot of people said that the bombings over the weekend would just obliterate any possibility of any further ceasefire deal. That's why the agreement that was supposedly reached last night was so significant. Well, this morning, they got big problems. I want to read the quote directly from the president that he gave from outside the White House. Quote, Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the bleep they are doing. Do you understand that? So here we have the president taking this strong rebuke of Israel, also criticizing Iran, obviously, because of the ongoing conflict. But that is one of the headlines that we are tracking this morning. Of course, the implications here, not just in New York City, but all around the world, but especially here. Because of obviously our strong and thriving Jewish community that we have here in the New York City area. So everyone's watching that very closely. Everyone was expecting or thinking that this ceasefire deal would have been reached, which would have been extremely significant in the ongoing conflict there, the so-called 12-day war with Israel and Iran, not to mention what's happening in the Gaza region, the hostages, the return of the hostages, all these things all playing into it. It looked like a moment of positivity that would have been reached last night, but some of that has essentially been ripped to shreds this morning. We'll see how that changes. We know that President Trump also, once he was aboard Marine One on his way to Air Force One, on his way to the Netherlands for the conference, did announce that some Israeli pilots had turned around and were heading back to wherever it was that they were going to, and that they had delayed or canceled or were not carrying on those airstrikes that were supposed to happen in Iran. So the president had called for the airstrikes to cease after they had restarted, and it looks like the pilots or whoever's commanding those pilots had heeded those directions from the president. So that situation may be getting closer to where the president wants it to go, but we got to watch it very closely. Of course, here in the city, what are we watching? Everyone's talking about the election. And we did get some numbers that I wanted to go over this morning because significant. We did a little adding here, a little math. The early voting numbers were 384,338. So in the early voting, the weeks leading up to it and the weekend before, 384,338 people cast their ballot. Those numbers coming from the New York City Board of Elections. Well, as of this morning at 9 a.m., the number was 483,017. So that means that just this morning, in the first hours between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., about 98,679 people had voted. I know I said about, and that's very specific. So almost 99,000 people, almost 100,000 people had voted this morning. And they kind of break it down. So some of the biggest numbers that we saw, Manhattan, Almost 30,000 people voted today. The Bronx, 10,000 people voted today. Brooklyn, about 35,000. Queens, about 20,000. Staten Island, about 2,300. Again, all that adding up to 98,000 people just in the first 3 hours of voting this morning. So how will turnout be? Turnout is going to be a pretty big factor here. Early voting, according to everyone who tracks this stuff very closely, early voting, we believe, has put Zoran Mamdani, the 33-year-old assembly member who essentially has come out of nowhere here and is challenging the legacy candidate, Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, the family name synonymous with New York politics, generation of political leadership, not just in the city, but also, of course, as the governor in New York, him, his father, so on and so forth. But Zoran Mamdani, the man from nowhere, or from the city, who's kind of come out of nowhere when it comes to politics, we believe he's better positioned at this moment with early voting. Early voting. Not to say that the former governor won't get a strong showing today, but strong support from early voters and a base that skews younger is something that Mamdani has and is riding high on as he comes in today. So how will the weather play with that? It's possible that same day turnout may drop, especially among older voters and more traditional voters who typically favor Andrew Cuomo. So that's one reason why the heat, the high temperatures could play a factor in the outcome of who becomes the next mayor of New York City. Just something to watch. Cuomo's campaign is actually responding. They're calling for shaded polling sites, water stations, volunteer efforts to help get seniors to the polls because they know that this is going to be an issue here. Those early voting numbers were actually way higher than what we saw in the last mayoral primary, almost double what it was before. And that's why we believe it directly benefits Mamdani, who has sort of energized these younger voters, a lot of people who maybe had never cast a ballot before. And then another factor here that really is relatively unique to New York City because they do use it in other cities, but the ranked choice dynamics, the ranked choice voting favors Mamdani because it's possible he's going to gain a lot of second choice support from progressive candidates, including Brad Lander, who is essentially running third at this moment. So you have Cuomo, who is in the lead, Mamdani, who is running second, and then Lander, Brad Lander, who is running third. New York City Comptroller Brad Lander, who has been running on a progressive sort of line, candidacy, issues, values, similar to Mamdani's, and those two really haven't sort of clashed for the progressive space. They've essentially, as we've moved forward, have kind of been running parallel to each other and almost combining their message, even appearing last night on the Stephen Colbert show, the late night show, CBS, together, which is just remarkable when you think about what is actually at stake here. So again, New York City primary today. It's election day. It's really hot out there, and a lot is at stake. A lot is happening. I mentioned the ranked choice voting. That's going to be happening in New York City. So what is ranked choice voting? You're going to hear about it because it's possible that we may not have all the results by tonight. We may not have all the results by tomorrow morning. It could be very tight because there's a couple different rounds here. So here's how it works. Voters rank up to 5 candidates in order of preference, first choice through 5th choice. If a candidate gets more than 50% of the first choice votes, they win outright. We don't think that's going to happen. If no one hits that majority, the candidate with the fewest first choice votes is eliminated, and voters who chose that eliminated candidate have their next ranked choice counted instead. So you see how people will be eliminated, and if you had them number one, whoever they rank 2, 3, 4, 5, they get that vote. And on it goes. So we will get a first round, second round, third round, fourth round, fifth round, sixth round. That's where it really starts to narrow. And sixth round, you may only see Cuomo, Mamdani, and Lander. And if you get to the 7th round and Lander is eventually eliminated and he's got enough second place votes that have Mamdani ranked second, then that's when Mamdani could get that final boost that could put him over the edge. So that's something that we have to watch very closely. So that's the Lander-Mamdani strategy at this point, basically a cross-endorsement deal. They've publicly urged their supporters to rank the other as their second choice. Deliberate ranked choice strategy, consolidate progressive votes, edge out Cuomo. It's essentially don't rank Cuomo messaging, and that is what they've been out there doing. Quick comment here. So we have a comment here from Tomcat. And listen, for as much as what we're doing here is just providing updates, this is also a forum for people to chat, people to get their word out, people to talk to each other. That's what a lot of this YouTube live and the chat room that sort of goes along with it. So we encourage people to write in, maybe throw some stuff out there. The candidate, good luck to the candidates. There are a lot of people rooting for Zorro. Assume that means Zoran Mamdani. Not sure if it's a sarcastic remark, because certainly there are people who are not hoping for him. But what we've seen with Mamdani is some people have said it's a reflection of the Democratic Party itself, that these more established candidates, people like Cuomo, people like Lander, people like Scott Stringer, people like Adrian Adams, didn't have the buzz, didn't have the enthusiasm behind them. Maybe their messaging was off. Maybe it was late. Maybe it wasn't really harnessing what people were listening to. Well, here comes Mamdani, who has this social media strategy, who was able to engage with a younger group of voters, but also clearly it's not just younger voters. He's been able to inspire some of the other voters who maybe have felt like they've been left on the sideline, but from the more traditional candidates. That said, Cuomo is still in a strong position to win this race. And so it's possible that some of the Mamdani buzz is just buzz, and that at the end of the day, it could be the more traditional candidate, the legacy candidate, Andrew Cuomo, who comes through. I just want to run through who's going to be on the ballot. It's going to be Andrew Cuomo, Mamdani, Brad Lander. We've talked about them. Adrian Adams, City Council Speaker. She's pledging to close Rikers, boost affordable housing, enhance public safety, education. Scott Stringer, former comptroller, campaigning on affordability, ethics reform, policing, sanitation. Zellner Myrie, state senator specializing in tenant rights, electoral reform, school funding, crime and victim support. Whitney Tilson, the investor, outside promoting common sense, public safety, and affordability. Michael Blake, former state assembly member. You may see Selma Bartholomew, educator, community-focused platform on the list there. And Jessica Ramos, former state senator, state senator, prioritizing mental health services. So you may see her name on the ballot there, but she also has pretty much endorsed former Governor Andrew Cuomo, because that's where she's landed on that. That's who's going to be on the ballot. Of course, all the city council seats are up. Borough presidents, they're also going to be on the ballot when people go to vote. So there's a lot going on when it comes to who will be elected tonight and throughout the day today. So that's what we want to keep in mind as we head through this day here. It's hot out there, just sort of recalibrating. 10:26 here on this Tuesday. It's election day, and the focus will be on the Democratic primary for New York City mayor. Elsewhere in the city, you got to be aware of what's happening when it comes to the heat. You could see power outages today. We saw all kinds of problems yesterday on New Jersey Transit and Amtrak. So the public utility system could be in trouble, the public transit system. It's going to get hotter today than it was yesterday. So we could see power outages, Con Ed reducing voltage in certain areas. Power outages are certainly possible. Just some things that we want to watch out there. And the other headlines that we're tracking, Diddy trial probably going to end this week. And the other major headlines that we had this morning that I can talk about again, President Trump had brokered that ceasefire deal between Israel and Iran. Well, as of this morning, that ceasefire deal clearly has been broken. The president calling out both Iran and, in particular, he singled out Israel. Both of those sides had resumed attacks, Israel with airstrikes, Iran with rocket fire. The president publicly condemned the collapse, expressing frustration with both sides, but he did specifically call out Israel, and he dropped an F-bomb outside of the White House. I can read his direct quote again. I mentioned this earlier, but that was 20 minutes ago, so I'll mention it again. He said, quote, "Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before." So these are the words from the president. Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. That's a rare position for a U.S. president to take in public, to so publicly criticize Israel leadership, Benjamin Netanyahu, in that way. That quote goes on to say, you know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the bleep they are doing. Fill in the bleep as you will. And then the questioning of, do you understand that? So President Trump had brokered the ceasefire deal after the 12-day so-called war between Israel and Iran. And this morning, both sides were basically attacking each other again. The update that we did get relatively recently is that the pilots who were on their way from Israel to Iran to launch more attacks had turned around after the president had voiced his frustration. So maybe that spells some more good news for today. We will see. The other major headline, of course, New York City primary. That's happening today. All eyes will be at the top of the ticket. Zoran Mamdani, former Governor Andrew Cuomo. The race is tightening. Before we sort of log off here, there was one poll that came out yesterday that I just want to hit real quick because it was pretty significant, and it found that, let's see, where did I put that? Where did I put that one? It found Mamdani leading after the ranked choice voting system all played itself out. So that was an Emerson Pix 11, the Hill poll, and that poll sort of reflected this late momentum that we've seen from Zoran Mamdani, the 33-year-old state assembly member. And it showed that when it comes to who's going to be ranked first overall, Cuomo has the edge. But as the rounds go on, in ranked choice voting, when you get to the later rounds at the very end, when Brad Lander is eliminated, and some of the people who will have ranked Mamdani second on their Brad Lander card, that if Mamdani gets enough of those votes, it could boost him past Cuomo. Now, is that poll an outlier? That's the question, because there were two other polls that the Cuomo campaign will cite in recent days that also showed that he had a margin, maybe in the double digits, maybe in the 10% range, or at least certainly didn't show the race as close as that. But polls are polls. We know recently from all the elections that we've seen that maybe the polls should give us a guide, but they're not exact. And one thing that we have to note here is that the current New York City mayor is not on the ballot today. He's running as an independent. And so whoever wins this primary will face him in the general election, along with Curtis Sliwa, who looks like he's the Republican nominee. Now, that said, Mamdani and Cuomo will both run as independents regardless. But you have to figure if you win this primary on the Democratic side, that you're in a really strong position. So we got to see what happens. It's hot out there. I hope everyone can keep it cool, keep it good. We are going to log off here at 10:30. We're going to check back in with you tomorrow morning at about this time. In about 90 minutes, the noon newscast will be on. We're going to keep up our skyline shot of New York City. Feel free to keep it going, keep the conversation going, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.